It's basically a tradition that whenever a film is massively successful, a sequel is greenlit. And sometimes you get sequels that try to ramp it up to make it bigger and better. Such is the case with James Cameron's follow-up to the massively successful Alien, Aliens. Cameron was able to make a film that is incredibly faithful to the source material while also bringing in thrilling new elements that expand on the mythos established in Ridley Scott's first film. Every element from that first film is spiraled to make it grander and even better, but unlike Alien, this film is an action movie rather than a horror movie. A subversion of expectations that at first glance might not seem like a great idea, but it's a move that results in a sequel that maintains the thrilling tension and suspense of the first, while at the same time delivering as an exciting action spectacle, and perhaps one of the greatest sequels ever made. One of the best things about this movie is its commitment to its characters. James Cameron waited until near the end of the production to film the scenes where the Colonial Marines are hanging out and talking with each other, which was an extremely smart move. The camaraderie between the Marines is so palpable, particularly in the breakfast scene. The chemistry between this group is so good that all the jokes and insults they toss at each other feel so authentic, and just as it was in Alien, the dialogue, particularly early on, has an improvised quality to it that makes conversations between characters flow naturally. The characters are just amazing. It's a pure joy getting to watch them interact on screen, and they all have such distinct and likable personalities. Michael Biehn is fantastic as Hicks. He comes across as a stoic and badass leader like he should, but I like the calm, level-headed demeanor that Biehn brings to the role, as it makes the character interesting and extremely likable. That being said, I must admit, whenever I think of the Colonial Marines, I instantly think of the late Bill Paxton as Hudson. He embodies everything the Colonial Marines are in this film. He's incredibly charismatic, he's brash yet still lovable, and he has many of the film's most quotable lines. But of course, Ripley is a show stealer here, as Sigourney Weaver gives one of her best performances of all time. This film is not afraid to explore the traumatic impact the events of the first film had on Ripley. Weaver embodies that trauma magnificently, bringing a strong sense of pain-induced world weariness to every scene. On top of that, she now suffers from nightmares of the experience, so we really get to see the extent of just how much she has suffered and has continued to suffer from her first encounter with the xenomorphs. Wisely, the film also illustrates how her life has been impacted by this in other ways. In one of the best scenes in the film, Ripley testifies her experience to a board of Weyland-Yutani executives who not only seem far more concerned with the money they lost from the Nostromo's destruction, but also doubt the validity of Ripley's claims due to the fact that there has been a colony on the planet where she first encountered the derelict ship for over 20 years. And to add insult to injury, her flight status is revoked. It is so tragic seeing Ripley go through something unbelievably horrifying only to be doubted and ridiculed, but that's part of what makes her arc so satisfying. Ripley spends the entire first hour of the film being told she's wrong, she's not taken seriously, and mocked, even after she's asked to accompany a unit of Marines to investigate the colony when they lose contact with them. But seeing her be proven right repeatedly as soon as they encounter the aliens is so satisfying. It's honestly so much fun watching Ripley trying to educate people who are completely dismissive and then being proven right time and time again, especially considering that Ripley becomes the leader of the survivors, using her experience and knowledge of the xenomorphs to lead everyone to safety. Moreover, Ripley as a character is given some very welcomed further development as she's given so much more humanity, personality, and we even learn more about her backstory. One of my favourite scenes from the special edition is the scene where it's revealed that Ripley had a daughter who died while she was in cryosleep. This scene is so heartbreaking because it further establishes that Ripley's encounter with the xenomorph essentially ruined her life. She was lost in space for 57 years because of it and missed her daughter's entire life. That leads me to what I think is the strongest element of this movie, the overarching theme of motherhood. The relationship between Ripley and the young girl Newt is so strong. The chemistry between Weaver and Carrie Ann is so genuine, and I love how the two characters are brought together by their shared experiences. Newt loses her parents when they're killed by the aliens, which parallels Ripley losing her daughter because of her own encounter with the aliens in the first movie. It makes their dynamic so beautiful because Ripley lost her daughter prior to meeting Newt and never even got to say goodbye to her, which gives Ripley and Newt's relationship so much more emotional weight and resonance as both are able to regain what they lost in each other. The aliens themselves are unsurprisingly a major highlight of the film. The motherhood theme is also reflected in the aliens as the Queen is effectively the mother of the entire hive of xenomorphs and even cares for its offspring. Seen when the Queen signals the other aliens to back off off when Ripley threatens to light her eggs ablaze. They also exhibit a theme because they impregnate unwilling humans with their demonic offspring, turning them into mothers. Yes, it is true that their design is different, and the warrior aliens featured in this film are smaller and perhaps easier to kill than the drones seen in the first. However, that doesn't make these creatures any less scary and utterly fascinating. We learn more of their strange life cycle with the introduction of the Queen, who lays all the eggs and controls all the other aliens. In addition, the fact that there are aliens plural makes them just as, if not more intimidating, as the human characters are forced to fend off seemingly never-ending hordes of xenomorphs hell-bent on capturing and using them for breeding stock. It makes the heroes feel small and helpless because it doesn't seem to matter how many xenomorphs they gun down, they just keep coming. But even with all the new things we learn about them, Cameron wisely maintains their mysteriousness, making them just as frightening as they were in the first film. Cameron also utilizes the transition from horror to action to employ a subtle Vietnam War subtext. During the Vietnam War, the American military drastically underestimated their opponents, the Viet Cong. While they did have more advanced weaponry, it proved ineffective against an army that used the dense jungle for cover and used hit-and-run tactics and guerrilla warfare. Very similarly in Aliens, the colonial marines travel to Hadley's Hope, viewing the mission as a simple bug hunt, embracing a false sense of security from their technological advantage. As such, they go into combat viewing their enemy as a feeble and primeval force, thinking victory is absolutely assured. But despite this, they enter a hostile and unknown environment home to an enemy that does battle using unconventional tactics. Cameron very cleverly uses the subtext to show how the Marines' cocky overconfidence leads to their defeat, and I've always loved how these characters go from brash, hardened, and self-assured badasses to quivering with fear as they're overwhelmed by the sheer numbers and terror afflicted upon them by the aliens. The action in the film is spectacular and a lot of fun to watch. The action sequences make very good use of the setting. The Marines' first encounter with the aliens is an excellent example of this, as the Marines are running scared and firing wildly in an unfamiliar and unfriendly environment. But there's also sequences that are just straight up awesome, like Ripley fighting the alien Queen in a power loader. Yes, I will unapologetically admit that Ellen Ripley engaging in a boxing match with the alien Queen using what might as well be a robotic forklift is one of the coolest things I have ever seen. Sure, you could argue that the film is so action-packed that it's almost too fun to be scared, and yeah, I would say Aliens is not quite as scary as the first film. However, Aliens still retains the atmosphere and suspense. You really feel like the characters are trapped, but whereas the first film entrapped the characters in a maze in which the alien could be hiding around every corner, in Aliens, the characters find themselves isolated and confined to a small room and are forced to use the few resources at their disposal to deter hundreds more aliens and survive. For me, the scariest scene is easily the scene where Ripley and Newt are trapped in a small room being stalked by facehuggers. There are few things more skin-crawling to me than watching Ripley trying to evade a facehugger crawling towards her at terrifying speeds and then wrapping its ungodly tail around her neck, desperately trying to live up to its namesake. It is absolutely terrifying watching these facehuggers attacking Ripley and Newt, knowing the unspeakably horrifying fate that awaits them should the creatures succeed. With all that said, Cameron also made the choice to tone down the gore for Aliens, and while the film is definitely deserving of an R rating, I wouldn't say it's as gory as the first. Yes, you could look at this as a downside, especially if you're a gore fanatic, but for me this was a brilliant decision. I am paraphrasing here, but James Cameron did say that you don't create fear with gore, you just create disgust. Aliens escalates a lot of elements from Alien, and yeah, it could have been gorier, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it should have. As someone who is a massive fan of suspenseful filmmaking, I'm glad Cameron decided to prioritize tension and suspense over gore, because it results in a more tense and thrilling experience. A particularly chilling carryover from the first movie is the inclusion of Weyland-Yutani. Despite Ripley saying attempting to capture the aliens for their bioweapons division would be catastrophic, the company is again trying to obtain such samples by any means necessary. While Paul Reiser's Carter Burke isn't nearly as scary as the late Ian Holmer's Ash, the idea of a corporate company sacrificing innocent people for a profit is terrifying. Burke starts off as a sleazy but seemingly understanding and caring businessman, but over the course of the film his corporate-driven selfishness reveals itself until finally he attempts to sacrifice Ripley and Newt to bring the aliens back to Earth. True, it's a twist that you do see coming given the context of the first movie, but the addition of a human enemy makes the situation even more hopeless for the characters as it adds a greater sense of isolation. The film was made before computer generated imagery became prevalent, which means all of the film's effects were accomplished in camera. The film makes marvelous use of mind-blowingly realistic sets, miniatures, puppetry, animatronics, and other amazing practical effects. I would argue this film still looks better than a lot of blockbusters that come out today. Now, I do have a strong appreciation for CGI and what it can do for film. Some of my favorite films utilize CGI in almost every shot. That being said, the special effects were done by Stan Winston, and his work here is astonishing. The knowledge that everything you see on screen is real adds another layer of tension and excitement. Winston's most impressive special effect in the film has to be the Xenomorph Queen, which he brought to life using animatronics and puppetry, and she looks incredible. There are few things more intimidating than the Queen standing tall above Ripley and Newt when they encounter her in the nest, and I want to stress once again that the fact that this is a real special effect does genuinely add something to the film. The sequences where the Queen is chasing Ripley and Newt out of Hadley's Hope and tearing the floor of the Sulaco to shreds trying to get to Newt are scary, not just because they're both very well done sequences, but because the Queen is real, and as a result, it really feels like there's an impossibly huge monster trying to kill the characters. Just like the first, there are two versions of the film available to watch, and while both versions of Aliens are great, regardless, I do prefer the special edition. Again, the theatrical version is great too, but the pacing is better in the special edition, and there is more character development with the restoration of scenes such as Ripley finding out her daughter died. The movie was nominated for 7 Oscars, including Best Actress for Sigourney Weaver. That almost never happens for big budget popcorn flicks like this, but frankly, it's more than well deserved. Aliens is one of the greatest sequels ever made, but on top of that, it's one of the best movies ever made, and a true masterpiece, as there are few blockbusters that have achieved the spectacle this film did, and even fewer that have topped it.